Hey, do you remember the last time I was working on this page in my comic? Well, I'm back at it, but this time we're inking, so let's dive in. While I was at Office Depot the other day, I decided to get some pages printed out so I could experiment with some different inking techniques. I wanted to see if I could nail down a solid method before diving headfirst into inking this entire comic. So you might notice I'm not using a regular pen or even a typical artist pen for this process. Instead, I'm going old school with dip pens. Now, some of you may recognize these as the pens that mangaka use to draw manga. Others might think of them as old-fashioned pens our forefathers used to sign historical documents. And then there are some of you who see them as dangerous ink-spilling nightmares that can ruin your drawing in seconds. But the truth is, dip pens are used by artists, both new and old. They're called dip pens because you have to physically dip the nib into the ink.
Well, duh.
What makes them special is their versatility. You can get a range of line widths just with one pen stroke. And without switching tools, I can outline a character boldly, add intricate details, and even fill in large areas with shading. Plus, they're reusable. Just refill the ink, and trust me, I've got plenty of that. I bought the biggest bottle of ink they had. I think a lot of people shy away from dip pens because they're scared of messing up, and really that fear comes up a lot with inking in general. But like with anything, you just have to practice and get comfortable with it. That's why I love events like Inktober. You're forced to ink every day, and eventually inking just becomes less intimidating. It's just training your mind not to be afraid anymore through repetition. If you had to parachute out of a plane, then you would most likely be terrified. Even if you weren't afraid of heights, you would still be nervous for the first time. And that's okay, that's just human nature being afraid of the unknown. And so in order to beat that fear, you have to get rid of the unknown factor. If you spent the next 2 weeks parachuting out of a plane once a day, eventually you wouldn't be scared of it. You wouldn't even think of it as a big deal because your body would automatically know what motions to take, and your mind would be at ease because it no longer needs to be scared of the unknown, leaving you to focus on perfecting your method. This is the same thing with inking, and that's why I practice a lot, because I love inking, and I love the effect that it gives and the contrast that it brings to my artwork. So I've spent a lot of time with ink now, and so if I want to sit down and ink a piece, I don't even think of it as a big deal anymore. It doesn't bother me. I can just focus on, okay, what technique do I want to use? I'm no longer scared of the unknown because I've turned the unknown into something common. And hey, Inktober is coming up. If you haven't participated before, I highly recommend it. I'll drop a link in the description to the official rules and some prompts if you want to give it a shot. I know I'll be joining this year, so stay tuned for that. You can see I'm not just using pens, but also brushes. These are just cheap brushes that you can get anywhere. Obviously, don't get the garbage ones, they'll fall apart immediately. But for large areas and parts of the drawing that I know that are just going to be filled in with black ink, I try to have a large brush that can hold a lot of ink and a smaller brush for smaller areas or more organic shapes. There's nothing really special about them other than they just carry more ink than the pens normally do, which can help me when working on large paper like this. I also like dry brushing. It's a technique where you let the ink almost dry on the brush before applying it, which creates a softer, more subtle texture. In this piece, I use it for smoke and heat effects coming off the firestorm. Oh, and another trick, I use Q-tips. They're perfect for giving random, natural textures in some area. Just kind of pull it apart and stick it in the ink, maybe dry it off a little bit with a paper towel, and then just go to town. Oh, and I've also got some white ink that I'm using as well. It's pretty handy for certain parts of the piece. Some artists prefer acrylic paint or gouache, some use watercolor, but this white ink has been working for me so far. I might try the others at some point. Most of the tools that I'm using are listed in my Amazon supply list, which you can find in the description. And while you're down there, feel free to check out my Patreon or follow me on social media to see what else I've been working on. There are so many different inking methods and styles, and I'm still trying to figure out what I want to stick with for Wytchborne. Hopefully I'll settle on a style before I get too deep into the comic, but for now I'm still experimenting. Here's a fun inking trick. For the floating sparks in this piece, I used a toothbrush. Yep, I dipped it in white ink and ran my thumb across the bristles to flick tiny droplets across the sky. It turned out great. Just make sure not to brush your teeth with it afterwards. Trust me, it tastes nasty. Not that I know that. Alright, we're at the end of this inking session, and I'm pretty happy with how this page turned out, but I'll probably try some more methods before locking down my final inking style for the comic. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button to see more of what I'm working on. And now, go make something awesome.